Hi everyone. Now we've done this. This is really interesting. We have a qualified physician with years of experience in internal medicine, specializing in elderly populations, who's been a nursing home medical director for 25 years. Really, right?
Yeah, 25.
And now has given up his practice as in hospice as a medical director. And he's here to give us his response to many of our challenges about how do we get referring physicians to listen to our story? How do we engage with them? How do we build that rapport? How do we get that special relationship? Because it's so important to have that referral. I also want to call special attention to Terry. Terry, would you please wave? Stand up, please, too. This is Terry. I know, I asked Arvid how much trouble I'm going to be in. This is Terry Lade, his wife of many, many years, and our dear friend. She's a BSN who has been specialized in surgery early in her career and has helped Arvid for years in handling the enormous amount of work that he did. This is the kind of doctor that took call, did his own rounds, never used a hospitalist. He was the guy in early doing the work. When my grandmother was really old, we called Arvid and said, would you please take my grandmother? Because he's just a very special person. So it's my real pleasure to introduce you to my friend, Arvid Lade. And he's a medical doctor and a fantastic human being. Now you're mad at me, so I'm just going to go and tell the story. No. First time I ever met him, we went to the lake. And I was already intimidated that he's handsome and he's got a beautiful wife and he's got all this. And he's just a great human being. We go to the lake, we back our boats out. His boat doesn't start. And I'm like, and that's just the way it is. We were young, fresh out of school. We got young families and boats, and then they're not brand new, so his boat doesn't start. So we run into town. He buys the parts, tears his engine apart, fixes his engine, puts it back together, puts all the things in, starts it up, and we go skiing. And I'm like, son of a bitch. How can anybody have this much talent? And then we go skiing, and he's unbelievable. So I dislike him greatly. So with that in mind, there's your introduction. Yeah. Arvid, how you doing?
He kind of said something that I was out of my practice doing hospice full-time care. I am still in a nursing home. I'm in nursing homes. That's my job now. I jumped both feet from my office practice to hospital practice about 4 years ago into long-term care, skilled nursing facilities, and assisted livings. So that's where I spend my whole day, and I am also a hospice associate medical director right now at Seasons. I've been medical directors off and on throughout hospice for the last 30 years as well. But I'm jumping the gun. I just want to say something about Mark Lewandowski, and I don't know if...
It's not your turn to speak right now.
I know, I've known Mark a long time, and I know a lot of you have known him a long time, and he's a scratch golfer, and he could hit as straight as Tiger Woods. But back in the day, he could throw a spiral like Russell Wilson. He could hit a tennis ball like Rafael Nadal. And at one time, I really think in my memory banks, he turned down an offer to play Division I baseball. I might be wrong on that.
What does this have to do with any of this?
But this is just this stuff that you don't know about Mark Lewandowski. The term jack of all trades, master of none. He's jack of all trades, master of them all. So
that was the master of none part.
I'm the master of none. You're the master of all.
Okay, let's jump into this question.
Okay, jump into
all right. So here we are, a group of hospices.
Yeah.
And one of our great challenges is making the connection with the referral physician community. You were that doctor for 25 years.
I never met a hospice person. Yes, no, that's not true.
Did you not?
No, that's not true. Early in my career, when I first started, about in 1991, so early 90s. I spent 4 years out in Eugene, Oregon, and I don't recall ever talking to a hospice person out there. Moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I had a really good friend who was a physician, And just, he gave me a call, and he was working for a VistaCare hospice at the time. And he called me up and asked if I would be interested in being an associate medical director with him. And so he took me under his wing, and he's the one that laid the foundation for my knowledge of hospice. And that kind of grew over the last 25 years. So in Tulsa, I've been very happily involved with hospice. And it's a tough, it's a tough hat. I kind of had two hats. I got my primary care hat and my hospice hat, and not too many doctors do that. And I think it's all about educating the physician. I mean, in medical school, we're not trained about hospice. I have a son in medical school right now at OU, and he said we have maybe one or 2 hours of someone coming in talking about hospice, and then they're gone, and they never hear about it again. And he could see it in doing this hospital rounds. He had a patient who had a metastatic cancer, and all the doctors were coming in saying, we can really treat this. We can do palliative radiation. We can do this. And he was sitting there listening to it, and he goes, Dad, no one talked to him about doing nothing. Just going home. And so it's kind of a sad case right now with in the medical community. So I think it's beknownst to us, it's all of our job to go into these physicians' offices, hospitals, however we can get to them and educate them. And I think you really educate them with but they have no idea what a fast A is versus a fast C. They've never heard the terminology. They don't know. So they don't know if they have a patient who qualifies for hospice or not. They need the information.
So, many times that we have possibly an incorrect opinion that the medical community, the medical doctor wants to keep the patient as long as possible. But what you're saying is there are a lot of people that just don't know how to assess the patient and what their options are for giving that care.
I think as physicians, we're trained to heal, we're trained to take care of. We want to continue to see them improve through their life, and when life starts to turn, we don't always have the right tools in our tool chest.
Did you rely on hospice to train you in any way, or to teach
Absolutely.
you? Did you take them as a colleague? And if you did, what would be the best way for somebody to penetrate that glass wall between the waiting room and the back office where they could actually get some time with someone like you and build a relationship?
But see, for me, I jumped into hospice really early in my career. When with the VistaCare. And VistaCare, I don't know what anybody's opinion with VistaCare was, but they were a big corporation, and they had great CME stuff, and they had, the education that they provided for us was awesome. And, since I've been involved in a lot smaller hospices, and we don't get that much education, I should say. But as far as getting to the doctor, you mean?
Yes.
Turn this around a little bit. Doctors are a tough breed. They'll eat lunch. During the years, I've had lunches come in where we get 3 or 4 doctors, and they sit down and they talk to us about hospice, and about the. I also think another good way is palliative care units now in hospitals. Ever since I was a physician, we never had a palliative care unit. At least in Tulsa, we never did. But in the last 5 years, they've developed palliative care units. I think you could co-sponsor grand rounds with a palliative care unit team, bring national speakers in, have it part of their annual meetings. You could sponsor something like that. And then again, it's just all about education. It all comes down to education. I could finish this whole thing up with education. This whole talk. Scotch.
Well, not Scotch yet. Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
So, tell me about when you were handling so many patients in your load, the conversation that you had with the patient regarding the transition from acute care to palliative care.
Oh, yeah.
Or to hospice.
Now in my life, which is long-term care, skilled, assisted living, I have at least probably 3 to 4 conversations a week, set up meetings with families regarding their loved ones who are declining. And hospice is always brought up in those conversations. So I'm having it 3 or 4 times a week. I had one the other day though. She was Seventh-day Adventist. They wanted nothing, no meds, nothing. They just wanted her comfortable, and so we just kept her comfortable. Didn't want hospice, didn't want medications. But you know, you get that extreme to the other extreme where we don't want mom to die. We send her to the hospital. You know, so that's more education too.
When you referred a patient to a hospice, whether it was VITAS or anybody else, what kind of communication did you want to follow up from the hospice?
Okay, and you guys know this too. You know, the primary care docs, it can really, there's a wide spectrum. I mean, even when I'm looking at the hospice I'm working with right now, I'd say about 90% of the physicians probably want to just go, if they're on hospice, you take care of them, you know? Even though they've been taking care of these people for 25 years, which is really important, why it's really important for us to communicate with them, because they know these patients. These are their friends, their family. And so it's hard for some 10% of physicians, it's really hard to let that go. And so they'll want some varying degree of involvement. And that really needs to be sorted out fairly early in the enrollment period.
Clayton was talking about this morning that one of the referring physician candidates out of Memphis, they couldn't get to that lady for 15 years, and they moved to palliative care. So sometimes there's gatekeepers, like your trusted assistant who's a nurse that takes care of you. I mean, nobody's going to get to see you without going through certain gatekeepers. How does the hospice community penetrate that gatekeeper to get to the physician?
In the office?
Yeah. They don't. We're all like, I don't know. That's the magic.
That's not a glass wall. That's a brick wall. You're not going to get through from the nurse or the receptionist sitting in that waiting room. You're going to have to make an appointment to take them out to lunch and talk to them to get the information, or there's just no way getting back there unless someone has gotten other better ideas worked. It's hard. The doctor's offices, I mean, that's a fast-moving machine that they're moving every 15 minutes, and they might go work right through lunch. There's not much time to allot for someone to come in and say, hey, here's my 15-minute spiel, and you're going to have to get them to a lunch.
Can I interject?
Absolutely, my dear wife.
I feel like maybe sometimes we can get a physician that does recruit and does use hospice a lot and go through that, because if you're influencing, doctors influence.
A physician-to-physician
and
referral.
it's things that have worked for physicians and patients that are happy. If you could get a physician in there to talk to another physician, that might be a better possibility.
And if you have a medical director who knows a lot of physicians in the community, focus on those guys and just throw the name out.
You guys have a message, and that message needs to be out there, but it's tough to get in. It's tough to change these doctors' minds, because it's kind of like when we get, pharmaceutical companies come in. We learn a ton from them, but for us to learn it, you got to teach us. So I think that maybe physician might be a better way than sitting in an office trying to get in.
My life now, though, I'm in a nursing home, so hospices come in all the time. That's a revolving door coming through. And as far as nurses in a nursing home, it's totally different than nurses in an office, because you'd be amazed at the power of a nurse in a nursing home, because those families of those residents see that nurse almost as family. So if a hospice is a breach and we're talking about it, and that family hasn't made a choice yet, they're going to ask, the first person they're going to ask for a referral is that nurse. Who do you see in your facility who's taking care of their patients the best? And that's who they're going to choose. They never ask me, by the way. I'm the last.
You've made the jump from a practice in a clinic with working in nursing homes now over to hospice. What things do you see in hospice operations or workflow or care models, et cetera, that you wish the hospice owners would know? from a physician perspective, what is it that you wonder? Like, why in the heck do you do that? Yeah.
Can I look at it real quick? That was one of the toughest questions you offered me, because from an operational standpoint, I don't see the operational standpoint. My life is so busy talking to families. I'm not really good at the question, actually, Mark. Repeat it to me again.
What things, now that you're in the hospice side,
yeah.
what things do you wish they would improve? Or you wonder, why the heck do you do that?
Okay. I think for the most part, hospices, at least in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and there's a whole lot of hospices in Tulsa, Oklahoma, they all run pretty much, I think, on that same wheel. I don't think there's too much thinking outside the box. I think they need to be able to figure out how to stand out in that crowd of hospices and put their head above and just figure out what they need to do that. I got some ideas.
Can I ask kind of a
Oh, please do.
to that one too?
Absolutely.
So you mentioned before about you don't think many physicians, you think it's a lack of knowledge as opposed to them hanging on to patients to be able to bill for longer, right?
I don't think it's a billing thing.
So that's my biggest question then, right? So
Yeah.
if you're in a marketplace like we're in North Houston, right? And,
Yeah.
and we're in you literally could throw a brick and hit a hospice, where we're at. There's so many hospice there, and they're in physicians' offices every single day trying to educate physicians, getting to them and educating them, right? So it's not, I don't know that it's so much a lack of knowledge. And so that was my question to you is.
So do you think they have access to them then?
Yes, they absolutely
Okay.
do.
How do they
And-
get access to them?
Going to the gatekeeper. I mean, it's buying lunch,
Okay.
If you look at their calendars, it's every single day. It's a hospice or a home health company.
Right, it's
that
a
is
lunch
providing
time.
lunch for them. So they're getting the time, they're getting
Right.
the education, they still are referring incredibly late. So at that point then, if it's not billing and it's not education, do you have any ideas on what might be left that is kind of holding that referral from being
Yeah.
so incredibly
It's still a
late?
difficult, it's still a difficult subject to address to a patient.
And we've even offered, all of us have, even offered to go in at a moment's notice and
And we'll-
have the
we'll educate
conversation.
them.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we'll talk to the families for you if you're not comfortable having the conversation. So, I'm all about removing barriers, right? So,
Right.
how do we get to yes, kind of thing. So, what's left at that point? You know what I mean? Like, as a
Yeah.
physician, what's left that we can do as a hospice if it's not billing, it's not an educational problem, it's not a conversation with family problem, then, what is there that I'm missing from my perspective?
I still think there's a perceived misconception of hospice in the general community
No, there's no question.
that has to, that's part, it's going to be, that's very difficult to address. And in Houston, you're dealing with a lot of social issues, different, a lot of Mexican families who may look at hospice in a totally different way, the death and dying. And it's just continue to educate the community too. I don't know how you go about, community education, that's a big chore.
Oh, I was just going to say, and this is going to be extremely probably unpopular, but most length of stay issues are internal issues and not the external world precedent, meaning that it's self-inflicted. The evidence of that is just when you watch hospice, I've been doing this way too long, you watch a CEO go from a hospice to a hospice to a hospice, and in each case, length of stay goes up, 25, 30, 40 days, whatever they've learned how to do. And so a lot of times it has to do with the paradigms, first of all, expanding paradigms of what the hospice patient looks like. I don't mean to get off on this too much. Expanding that so everyone paints that picture, and then getting our clinicians and everyone involved with our hospice comfortable with it, because there's a vibe. Right now people think that people are actually living longer, they're doing something wrong. And this is a projection that comes out that's felt. And that and increasing your documentation to perfection. Those three things right there. And then the fourth thing, cutting some good deals with managed care outfits. I mean, you can't even keep length of stay down at that point. But those were 4 things.
So I don't know how to get you're doing what you're doing. I think you just got to keep
Chris.
tightening that back. You know.
I think one thing, as physician groups become more incorporated with health systems, if you can get to that chief medical officer of the health system, if it's an academic medical center and you can get to the GME team and, like you said, participate with grand rounds a little more and really get some buy-in level at the C-suite of the health system, that whole medical executive chain of command really can have some influence if they have buy-in.
Right.
So that's an option.
Shoot.
I have 2 questions for you.
Okay.
The first question is, if you could speak to the quality of care for your patients, what's something that you feel like a hospice could do to improve the quality from your lenses for the patients that you're serving? That's my first question.
Okay. You know, I read a recent study, and it came out of Canada regarding exactly that question, the quality of life issues in terminal patients in ICU setting, though. And it's called the GWP programs, actually 3WP program, 3 Wish Project. It came out last year, and at its core, let me write down. I just got to tell you about what its core is. It's such a good. It was such a neat, inspirational piece. I have not opened this yet, so I'm gonna look for this thing. And so at its core is, 1, for the patients to dignify their death and celebrate life, to humanize the dying process and create memories, and for hospital staff members to foster patient and family-centered end-of-life care and inspire a deep sense of their vocation. And one case that really stood out to me was this guy who was on a ventilator, and his wish was to could be put out on the veranda with his family and hospital staff around, and they were going to extubate him. He had a chronic pulmonary disease, wouldn't survive without his ventilator. So they've got all that done, took him out to the veranda. As the sun was setting, they extubated him, and he died peacefully. So something, to do something like this 3 Wish Project is really, really a cool thing to do. And it just focuses doesn't focus on the patient's death. It really does focus on their life. And that's what I think all people want. So.
There's so many people in here that do marvelous
Absolutely.
things within their hospice. And the challenge is, how do you get that message to the physician community when there's a brick wall there? So if you can't penetrate that, you can't get the message. If you have a unique value proposition, how do you get it there? So that's kind of one of the challenges that we as an industry go through in getting to the physicians. Jamie.
You have another question?
Okay, just kind of.
We'll come back.
On that same token of 3 wishes and how to get communicating with the physicians, I have a question, because I'm from Oklahoma too, but I know this is national. One of the first questions you're asked when you check into surgery or ER, inpatient, or whatever it is, do you have an advance directive or living will?
I thought it was, do you have insurance?
Well, no, go first.
Okay.
Yeah, money, then we can talk about what you want. But not only do the patients really know what that is, but the people who are asking about advance directives, they don't know living wills. That seemed to always have, that always fell on my shoulders, working in the ER and palliative care. And the more and more that we would try and educate, the more and more we were realizing that these are things that need to be taken care of in the nursing home, in the primary care, with the same pulmonary doc they've seen for 20 years, and all of that. So my question is, what are we missing, and how can we stress that to the providers upstream? So where can we get the GPs and the specialists and the nursing homes to have those conversations before the nursing home patient at 85 or COPD comes in and wants to restrain them and ventilate?
I know it's a bad way to go. With EMRs now, they're populating all over the United States right now. Everybody's got to have an EMR. And I'm pretty sure, and I don't have an EMR because I'm in a nursing home. But I'm pretty sure that the advanced directive or living, you know, that is one of the check boxes I would assume is on that EMR.
They are typically, but the problem is and this is nurses as well. The people who are asking that, let's tick off this box, let's go through these questions. There's 5 questions. It's very short and very quick, but we are not educating the patients. We're not asking those questions appropriately. So when we get to the one about artificial nutrition, there's so few people who are willing to actually have that conversation and explain it because they need to check that box. We need to move on to the next. And that is something that gets all over me. I love 3 wishes. I'm a huge proponent of it, but advanced directives in Oklahoma, we're going to do some horrible things to you if you don't have that filled out. Because legally we have to, unless the physician will step up and say, don't do it, I'm the physician, and they won't because they aren't
Yeah, I
trained
mean,
to have the conversation.
You
So
have to have a conversation with the patient before you can do that, to know what his thoughts were prior to it. In my nursing home situation, everybody's got power of attorney. I mean, a living will or a DNR, because it's not the same.
But it does switch too. I mean, I've seen your patients where they were, full codes and that it evolves and then it becomes a DNR. So who's done that? Who's made those conversations with those patients? You have.
Yeah.
But, those have to be made. You can't just leave.
Yeah, you can't leave it to the air because it's not going to happen.
there's a missing education piece, as with a lot of things, to not only the importance of that and the legal ramifications of having or not having it, but why are we not doing it all the time with every patient, especially those with a chronic illness, no matter where they lie in the spectrum at that time?
You're right, it's a missing link.
So we're actually getting a lot of palliative care referrals for advanced care planning
Exactly, I bet you get a lot of that.
every day, primarily from PCPs, because they
Yeah.
don't have the time in their 15, 20-minute productivity that they have to meet to have those
Long
discussions.
yeah.
So we need probably 5 or 6 a day just for advanced care planning.
Well, it's billable on
It
the Part
is.
B side,
Yeah.
advanced directives.
Yeah.
It's part of what, the ACOs want, so.
So they recognize it, they just don't have
They
the
don't have the
time
time.
to do it.
Which
Well,
is, I mean, that's a shame.
I think one of the things that's going to drive that, just like everything else does with human behavior, is going to be forced to, right? So MIPS has probably done that a little bit for you. I mean, they were just talking about 99497, which is the code, for advanced care planning. And so being in a state that's a non-corporate practice medicine state, besides owning a couple hospices, there's also a visiting physician company that we own. And so just learning and being aware of how to get to those folks further upstream is exactly through that. I mean, you could, just depends on that physician group. You could choose that as one of your MIPS measures to measure.
Right.
And of course, you sort of, it sort of forces you
It does.
to be aware of that as you go in, especially in that environment, because that's the same environment that we're in, is a
Yeah.
skilled environment. So
Yeah.
it really helps if you got a team of, APPs that can back you up on some of just hitting some of the other visits where you can spend that time, that 30 minutes with that patient and that
Mhm.
family.
Yeah.
So.
Good.
Ashley, you said.
Yeah, so you've worked with multiple different hospice agencies and got to experience different facets of the care. What would you say if you had a magic wand and you could fix one thing about the hospice industry, what would it be?
I love that question. One thing that I see needs fixed. I don't want to be flippant. IDTs can be too long.
Amen.
But they're not really. They're not that bad.
What about as a primary physician? Like, if you
Yeah.
could change anything about hospice care, what would it be?
Because I love my nurses, I love my aides, I love the people who come out to the floors. The back office, I don't know much about back office. I don't know much about ownerships. I don't know what they do back there because I am frontline. And I guess not overworking your staff, making fun times for your staff perhaps, give them a good environment to work in, they're always getting dumped on. Someone calls in sick, they're gotta go take it, someone else's patients. All that conveys to the patient they're seeing or families. The happier your staff is, the happier your patient load's gonna be. No, you've had enough. No, I'm just kidding.
As far as, just, your breed, as far as physician, way. And.
Quirky people.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're just gonna self-describe the predominant characteristics of physicians, and the things maybe we might want to keep in mind when dealing with that breed.
Yes, that's all.
I know it's a human.
It's a human behavior thing, and it's.
Yeah.
I mean, you got such a spectrum of a scope of spectrum of what people. You can tell what they're going into and what kind of personality types they are. You would be great at looking at this. Pulmonologists are not happy people. Okay, they just aren't.
Well, see, this is important. This is important information. Okay,
they're not.
Write that one down. Okay, so.
You're all just for some reason are happy guys. Why, I don't know. But there's a whole spectrum of some people who aren't very happy, doctors. And I don't know, it draws that type of personality type into those categories. Family practitioners, internists, we're all happy.
And reaching, really the goal of, I guess,
as far as reaching them,
usually data oriented.
I mean, pulmonologists are very data oriented, very, very cerebral. Cardiologists are the same, very cerebral. Family practice guys, they'll go water ski, or do what. Internists, there's a whole spectrum there too that are really quirky, weird people.
You bring up a point last week or the other day where you and I were talking about white papers that physicians read, and I was talking about my next door neighbor who sends me papers all the time that he wants me to read. And there's certain types of medical professionals that would like a story about hospice in a white paper format. A document that's very academic with good statistics and backup. And yet I see too many hospices with really cute flowery pictures and happy older people that are obviously not dying, and lots of purple and yellow and pink. And there's no chance that my next door neighbor, as an example, would ever look at that.
Yeah.
But he'd read a really nice white paper with statistical data on it.
I agree.
See,
That would be a plus. If there is anything like that. There you go. Next
we'll make it.
There ought to be, yes.
I have a question. We're from Tulsa as well. So one of the things that we run into a lot in long-term care settings
Sure,
is
what?
although it is the patient's right to choose the hospice they go with,
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
we get locked a lot from facilities.
Yeah. And you know why? Because some owners of nursing homes own their own hospice.
Yeah, and they have interest. I came
No,
from
large
one,
interest.
which was not a good.
You came from where?
Yeah.
Cura?
So we do things. So our thing is, of course, we want to take care of everybody because we know our care is top notch. So as a physician that works in a long-term care facility, you have a recommendation on ways to get around that, or ways to get to the physician directly.
I mean, you can always walk in and talk to the physician directly in a nursing home if you know when he rounds.
Yeah.
Because we're not on a time frame, so there's not a schedule for us. I can spend 5 minutes for one patient and an hour with another, and I have nobody waiting on me. I can just, it's my own schedule.
Do you feel like there's a obvious pool, like you just know at each facility who you're going to refer to if the patient doesn't have a choice or doesn't care?
No, I mean, and that's one thing, personally, it says, see, I won't advertise the hospice I'm working with right now, but I never push my hospice. I want my hospice to prove themselves. If they're good enough, their nurses are good enough, then they'll get chosen. I mean, I know my nurses staff know, I probably work with Seasons, but I have probably about 8 different hospices in each of my facilities. So, I mean, I don't push one. I let the nursing staff deal with the families as far as picking a hospice.
Okay, thank you.
But I can't even get, I mean, I'm a medical director at 2 facilities that the owner owns a hospice. I can't get anybody else in those facilities.
Yeah, no, that's the hospice I used to work.
Yes.
So other than financial compensation as an associate medical director, how does a hospice get a physician to be a large advocate for them in the community? Other than financial considerations, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And then, I mean, care has to be there, you know what I mean? Or is there anything else that would make you go, wow, that is a class organization? And go out of your way to promote them to your colleagues and other folks in the industry?
You know, I hear back from my nurses at my facilities are my eyes and ears, and I really do hear back and I see who they're referring to, you know. So, do I go out of my way to go find other doctors? I work 10 hours a day. I can't get out. And no other doctors come into my facility, so I'm kind of on an island. I have 8 little islands that I go to, and I don't see any cross paths with anybody else.
Right, but you're water skiing, right? And you see
Yeah.
Dr. Smith, who you know works across town.
Sure.
And you know that, what would a particular hospice be able to do for your patients that would make you stop what you're doing, right? And say,
Yeah.
flag them down and, hey, water ski over to them, and talk to them about what they do.
I mean, I have no hesitancy to talk about hospice to any other person, physician. I'm comfortable with it, so, you know, especially, so you just don't meet that many Joe Smith across the lake.
Gotcha.
You know, I mean, what do you think?
It sounds like, a takeaway for me is that the nurse community may be much more influential than the physician community.
I think so. At least in my world, it
And
is.
that in certain disciplines, a white paper is much more appropriate than anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're, you know, as you example, cardiology, they read white papers.
Yep.
They sit up
So
and
will
read the data.
pulmonologists
That's
who are gonna
pulmonology, yeah. And then there's certain other types of specialty where you probably ought to go and work with that nurse community, just
Yeah.
as important.
Yeah.
You know, we all know that there are people that are influencers of the physician that are very, very important in that physician's life, okay?
Right.
But I don't know until today we had that deep of understanding that it might be the nurse that, at the facility, that has more pull than anything else.
Or and it depends on, at the facility, it depends on who's the one that actually is talking to the family about hospice. Sometimes it might be the social worker who does the talk. I've had multiple hospices come in and offer lunch to the facility staff and just give a little update on who they are and things like that nature, which is pretty good. I mean, I think that works too. It's just getting your foot in the door and then really showing up.
Good, Al.
Okay,
I was just getting positive experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
go ahead.
And I was going to say from an experience, we have a physician that comes in, I'm in an IPU. We have a physician that comes in and does follow his own patients in our IPU. It's very rare that.
What's an IPU? Sorry.
Inpatient unit, sorry.
Okay.
So the physician, he has his own practice, he actually has 2.
Is it a hospice IPU? Or it's-
Yes, a hospice IPU.
Okay.
But he follows as a community physician his patients that come into us. So a couple of things he's given us on feedback, because I just thought it might be appropriate. He always wants to know when his patient comes onto our service, whether he referred or not. This patient went to the hospital, he's not following them at the hospital, he still wants to be notified upon admission. He gets very upset if he's not. And then anytime he comes in and sees them every day, if anything happens overnight, he wants to be notified, even on the weekends, he wants to be notified always.
So there's those rare guys out there that you just have to keep it,
Right,
you know, have to connect with them.
And he also follows patients in the facilities and, you know, if they went into long-term care or whatnot. And he wants to know, and he asks the family, so, you know, what's been your experience? And he wants to know that if we there's a phone call that goes out from the facility nurse that, hey, you know, Mr. Smith is having some breakthrough pain, this isn't working, that we're responding within an hour. So our after hours or weekends or whatnot are coming out. And it makes the hospice compare website.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, yeah, exactly. You gotta be responsive.
Thank you, Arvid Lade. Appreciate you very much. Are you gonna hang around and have a cocktail?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Terry, will you hang around and have a cocktail? Fantastic. So, you did good for you.